out to Fidel Castro. Happy birthday. I am your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and our very valued patrons. Thank you so much for coming back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you do dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way in promoting the channel. There is no champagne room or movie night tonight. The TIR replay is up from our screening of 1989's Relentless from last night. People seem to enjoy the film as it kind of sets the tone for the grown-up horror that we get in the early half of the 1990s. The horror thriller that becomes an award-winning genre with movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs. Relentless is a horror director taking a stab at a more serious film with a great cast and Brat Packer Judd Nelson as the star. It's definitely worth a watch. Again, if you are a patron of the show, that episode is up. Does it have all of the Bill Cody stories in it? No. You would have been there for that because I have to shut off the recording at a certain point because there's too much insane shit people say. If you want to know the insane shit that people say, you got to join us for movie nights. We will be back at our regularly scheduled time, 9 a.m. Pacific, Saturday, with another very special What Fresh Hell with MT at the helm while I take a breather and prepare for the J Miles Pioneer Chicken Birthday Extravaganza. It's not that big of a deal. We're just going to meet up at the last Pioneer Chicken. It's located in LA. And hang for a bit. I believe I have the details posted all over the TIR socials. With all of this said, if you do dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on air, and if you want to join us for these movie nights, champagne rooms, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become part of the crew, you get access to movie nights and champagne rooms for as little as $3 a month or a one-time payment of $30 for the year. You get the satisfaction of knowing that your small donation goes a long way in keeping TIR on the air. Now, let's talk about the surveillance state and immigration. Don't cheer for that. Do not cheer for that. Maybe many of you watching or later listening to this show caught the news that the United States government is investing $20 million in taxpayer dollars into waterproof electric shock gloves for ICE agents. It sounds like the kind of device a comic book villain would supply his henchmen with. But in 2026, ICE and CBP are functioning as the personal henchmen for this administration. The ability to administer electric shocks to non-combative individuals is beyond fascistic, just downright demonic. Donald Trump campaigned on xenophobic fears of foreign forces undermining American democracy by entering the country illegally, supposedly doing nothing more than plundering the goodness of this great nation. Its greatness, according to this mythology, was not tarnished by its own doing, but by these alien combatants who were wreaking havoc on the body politic. Trump was going to do what gutless Democrats didn't have the spine to do, rid the country of these violent intruders. But as we've seen with actions in Minnesota, including Operation Metro Surge, all the administration has done is terrorize innocent, tax-paying citizens. The myths have been shattered by live stream videos of unprepared, heavily armed ICE agents on seek and destroy missions, political pirates emerging from the dangerous depths of society. Whether motivated by despair, ideology, or outright hatred, ICE has increased its numbers and its funding. And whether a person has a violent history, is waiting for a hearing, or has a work permit, none of that seems to matter. These officers have a quota to fill, and the Supreme Court, along with local law enforcement agencies, has often assisted in their campaigns of terror. Yet we're told that the real terrorists are no longer far-right extremists engaging in political violence. Instead, they're anarchist book clubs filled with people who may have never been in a fight in their lives. This isn't the first time we've seen this happen. As we've discussed on this show, the 1990s were filled with government repression and surveillance of people in the environmental movement. There was a time when the United States government considered the biggest threat to democracy to be environmental terrorism. That's right, property damage, not the loss of human life. was supposedly the biggest threat to the country. We couldn't let these dangerous ideas about a planet on fire spread because people might lose their minds, start protesting, and damage the machinery, destroying forests. Now, the enemy is ideas, feelings. Are you an anti capitalist? What does that mean to you? Do you want more regulation and less monopoly power concentrated in the hands of a few? It doesn't matter how you define your anti capitalist ideology. The state understands you as a potential enemy, and its eyes are locked on you from your social media posts to your comings and goings. Another thing we have to keep in mind is that many of the immigrants ICE is going after are people who have had legal status, but no clear pathway to citizenship. We've talked about this on the show before, and I wrote about it a few years ago. DACA and TPS are complicated pieces of legislation that don't necessarily provide a clear pathway to citizenship. So many people, even while showing up for their appointments and complying with the system, are being captured and sent into civil detention indefinitely. Electric shock gloves, flock cameras, social media surveillance. I feel like people were more upset when 2 Live Crew was being accused of producing obscene material. So where is the collective frustration? Has the fear worked? One thing this administration is quite cognizant of is the failure of the George Floyd summer. Between January 6th, COVID, and what became known as the George Floyd protests, they knew they couldn't allow another situation to get out of hand like that. So the narrative control became essential. During Trump's 4 years out of office, the media did a fantastic job of pivoting coverage away from rogue law enforcement and toward the spectacle of poor people behaving badly. Images of Black kids stealing from stores were enough to prompt the president to deploy the National Guard to the streets of Washington, D.C., even as crime in the city had dropped precipitously. Was it just a test to see how far he could stretch his presidential powers? I don't know. Today, we're joined by journalist Will Potter to discuss the rise of the surveillance state and how it's being used by ICE to arrest immigrants and terrorize dissidents. Please welcome journalist Will Potter.
Appreciate you having me. No, it's good to see you.
There's a lot going on.
There sure is.
How has the language surrounding immigration changed the public perception of ICE and CBP? To what extent does describing immigrants as invaders or criminals or threats to national security make extraordinary state powers seem necessary?
Oof. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in your opening remarks, kind of referencing a bit where this came from with the FBI focusing on environmentalists as terrorists, right? So the government has known this power of language for quite some time, but those tropes go back even much further than the war on terrorism. We're getting back to some of the classical framings of all authoritarians and fascists throughout history, that the immigrants and protesters and often journalists and other dissidents are marauding invaders. They're coming for your women and children. They are a threat to national security and culture and religion and way of life. And so when I see this administration now using that language, it is signaling so much that we already have seen, that we know this trajectory. But they're being very clever of drawing from those historical moments where this has worked. It's able to kind of language as a powerful tool to mobilize the masses against a enemy and distract from what they're actually dealing with and the problems at home.
Did that rhetoric work to get elected? I shouldn't say did. It did. The rhetoric worked to get elected.
Sure.
But in practice, it feels like it's having negative effects on this administration, to the point where I watched a news story before the show today. And it was a local news story. I can't remember what state it was from. But a white gentleman was getting on an airplane, and it was a Delta flight. And as he was getting on, they stopped him and said, "Hey, we need you to wait until the very end." So he's like, "Okay." So he waits, and as he walks on, 3 or 4 ICE agents come snatch him up, take him away. They say they have a warrant for his arrest, but they were looking for a British man who happened to have the same name as him. Now, first of all, you should know who you're going to get. You should know what they look like. you should know what your target is. This
Right.
seems to be a theme with ICE, and that lets me know that their bonuses are not affected by the wrong person being caught up. Number two, this, in my opinion, is radicalizing people that were either apolitical or probably pro-Trump. Because once you get snatched up by ICE and they're very rude about it, they're not apologetic. It's going to change the way you feel about the administration and about immigration. So I wrote about this when I talked about how Trump gets elected. I think he uses, kayfabe and a lot of other tactics to rile people up. But in practice, it's a little different because now the rubber has to actually meet the road. And this is where you see the incompetence in the administration. It feels like no one likes this. No one likes seeing their neighbors get snatched up. Where I know we see some resistance with people, yelling, ICE is here and ICE patrols. But as you've written about and spoke about, these are the type of things that are getting people arrested. Even saying, "Hey, look out, ICE is here," making a phone call, sending a text message, even if it's through Signal, to say, "Hey, ICE, if we do this, we can stop ICE from snatching up our neighbors." That's becoming criminal activity as well. Do you think, as we said kind of before we came on the air, a lot of us that are watching this transpire are kind of passively viewing this encroaching authoritarianism?
Without question. And that's what terrifies me the most right now, because I think what we've seen historically is these darkest moments, these most dangerous moments of state power are arrived at both through outright complicity and collaboration. People that want to sign up for this, people that want to cheer it on. And we certainly see those people out in the streets. Everybody from groups like Patriot Front and Proud Boys to the folks that were in the Capitol on January 6th, the rise of violent white supremacist, neo-Nazi, and other fascist groups, right?
Mhm.
But the real dangerous element is how many people can turn away and for how long. That's the deciding factor of kind of where we go right now as a country, not just with ICE, but with this broader project of the administration to see complete control of our society. And I think about George Orwell quite a bit in this conversation of homage to Catalonia, when he was fighting Franco's fascists, literally fighting. He took up arms. He was shot in the neck. The George Orwell we all know. He talks about coming back from the front and going into Barcelona, and everybody's filthy, wounded, bleeding, fighting like for our very freedom and existence right outside the city, right?
Mhm.
And he talks about how people are shopping and at the cafe. And it's one of the most chilling passages in the book. And I just think about that all the time now, man. It's like we're all just shopping and going to the restaurants. I'm doing it too. We have to go about our lives. We go out and get, a restaurant or go to a movie and we have to keep going. But like, God, it feels like that's what's got us all right now is this is unfolding at a more and more rapid pace. It's getting more sweeping, as you said.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of folks are either afraid to maintain their gaze at what's happening or doing some real mental gymnastics of convincing themselves that this is still what they wanted or it's not as bad as those lefties and whoever are saying. So it's hard to say like where the public pulse is. But I think you're right that people are saying it's crossing thresholds that even the supporters of Trump were not envisioning.
Yeah.
It's one thing. I grew up in Texas, and it's like I know whenever immigration comes up, it's kind of almost a trope. People will be like, "Oh, this system is so messed up,"
Yeah.
right? Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the government's so screwed up." I
Yeah.
don't think they were when they agree with that statement, I don't think people are agreeing with, like, you know, ICE having Mobile Fortify, an app that has access to hundreds of thousands of images and registration in federal databases to scan us on the street and then decide ICE has the authority to disregard your actual birth certificate and trust whatever it says in the app. So stuff like that, I don't think people knew they were signing up for. And I hope, like you said, as we see this spread, it's like, oh, did you know Jimbo down the road, his cousin or whoever got rounded up or got this experience with ICE? I think people are going to hopefully use that to help turn the tide here.
There's a few things that frighten me. And one of the things, as someone that's talking on the internet, is that a lot of politics is handled with people talking on the internet. Granted,
Yeah.
there's still people that meet in person. They're awesome. But when we talk about organizations, the DSA is talked about as if it is this massive sweeping organization that encompasses the entirety of the United States. And I think the majority of its membership base is in New York. It's not that big. I think it hit 120,000 people. And I don't say that to belittle it. I don't say that to be dismissive. But I say that to put it in perspective of where media puts it. It's not that big. But there's media figures that are also being made to be larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
Hassan Piker. I don't have anything against Hassan Piker. Met him once. Very nice man. But, he, much like the DSA, is not the most powerful man in real politics. He's a media figure that's somewhat influential, but I don't know how far that influence or popularity goes. And when I see the people that are actually getting arrested, my first thought was, if you really fear Hassan Piker, you could arrest him. Wouldn't be very difficult, right? He does say some off the wall shit, and you could cite him for treason, throw him under the jail. But to me, that would probably spark, I don't know, George Floyd level protests, but it would really rile some people up. And you might even get people in the street. So you can just play this game where you call him out in the media, he responds. It just becomes, more pro wrestling for both of these people. And it's subconsciously at a certain point. But this is also the way that we understand politics. It becomes a show that we watch and this thing that we're not supposed to participate in unless it's voting time. Do you see that also being kind of one of the problems that we have here when we talk about these fears that we should be having about things like ICE and their ability to scan us into databases?
I mean, I certainly do. I mean, I'll own where I'm coming from on this, and I think it's why it terrifies the hell out of me. I mean, I've been in journalism my entire life almost at this point. I got my first newspaper job when I was 17 at the Dallas Morning News. From there, the Green Scare kind of repression in the 90s kicked up when I was 18, 19. And that's when I've been doing this stuff ever since. I'm 46. And so in that time, it's gone from investigative journalism, despite all of the faults of mainstream media and even investigative journalism, existing and being a somewhat viable path, both to have a job and maybe buy a house one day and take care of your kids or whatever, to being completely decimated. And alongside that, and all the problems we can talk about with that, is the rise of not just kind of social media and the internet, but this culture of the influencer.
Mhm.
And I would say more broadly, that culture of the spectacle.
Mm.
Now, of course, that spectacle has been rising for many, many decades, but there's something different that's happening right now that I think folks are trying to put their finger on, because we know everything is just kind of collapsing. These structures of accountability or checks and balances or even civility in public discourse are collapsing. And now we have, it feels like a spectacle society that we're all just watching other people and cheering on other people that may be saying what we want to say. And I think that's what a lot of the perceived threat about Hassan Piker and folks like this really is about, is because they're not like, I don't want to downplay him, but that general class of people, they're not in the streets. They're not doing community organizing. Some of them are doing great work and they're getting into politics or whatever. But their power is that, we want to like what they say and we want to share it with our friends. And that is like um, a way of kind of like participating without having to participate in a democracy, if that makes sense. And that's what's chilling to me right now. We're
Yeah.
getting more and more lulled and passive. We're getting incredibly dumber. Not to sound like
We were
out of
talking
turn.
about that the other day. The
Like,
anti-intellectualism.
oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
And not to say I'm
yeah,
not saying this from on high, right? Like
yeah.
I have, I'm a scholar and a journalist. I am not the smartest guy in the world. I've learned my material, but
Mhm.
like it is just seeing this rapid nosedive of how dumb we're all getting, that we're going along with all of this and believing just the most nonsensical authoritarian spin. That's an element of this, because we're watching it, and I think we're watching it like it's Succession or like Netflix
Yeah.
extended series where it's like, "Oh my god, can you believe they said this?" And it's like, "No, these are our elected officials. Like, we're cooked if this is the state of affairs." And so I feel that really deeply right now, including the question of kind of what you said at the start of that, Jason, of like, at what point is the Hassan or Amy Goodman, both of whom showed up in some recent government
Yeah,
surveillance and warnings,
yeah.
at one point are they just picked up? At what point is somebody like you or me? Like, we have no idea, like, when that lever is flipped. And I think that's what I really hope people listening to this kind of sit with after the show, and then talk to people you trust about it when you're ready to. It's, they are going to start flipping levers to go further. And as a journalist, it just scares the hell out of me, because journalists and more broadly, public figures, creators, people online, they're the first line of attack.
What's interesting is we see it here on this show, right? The suppression. It's a
Mm.
valve that can be open and closed on social media. There was a time where we got a lot more views. Um, I was a guest on a bigger show last month, and we had hundreds of new people come to the fold. And this month, the valve closed. The view counts are down exponentially. And I think it has a lot to do with the name of the show. I think it's automatic for an algorithm, and I think that's where it's easy to, I don't want to say silence, but you can direct certain voices um, by closing the valve. Because
Yep.
when you see the view count drop like that, and this is what I do for a living. This is my only job. Um, your first instinct is, okay, well, what show did well, and how can we
Hmm.
replicate that? And then the punk metal guy in me goes, no, we're going to keep doing the same thing we've always been doing. And if nobody gives a shit to watch a show about Kenya, I don't care. I think it's an important show. We're going to do the show about Kenya. Regardless if something else is going on in the news that, if I talked about it, maybe more viewers would and the thing that becomes the thing you have to talk about is like, what did Donald Trump say today?
Mm-hmm.
And you're following the craziness of an administration that doesn't even care enough in their hate to actually write a paper on why Cuba is the biggest threat to American democracy. They let AI write it. Like I'm not going to waste an hour of anybody's time digging into that fuck shit, But that to me is the way. You don't have to throw people in the slammer. You just go, okay, we're going to shut the valve off. They're going to wonder where their views are going, and they're going to start talking about Donald Trump saying some goofy shit about the White House. They'll do 18 shows on that. Or maybe they do 18 shows on why Mondami isn't left enough. But it's not going to be anything important. And the things that are actually happening, they won't even have time to cover it because it doesn't move the needle. We'll make sure those things don't move the needle. That's the difference to me. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I do. And I feel like it's a censorship by overwhelm and drowning. And we talk, especially in certain circles, you'll hear talk about being kind of blacklisted or shadow banned on the apps and views going down on social media, and all that stuff is valid and it's happening. But I think we're also missing what other changes and effects the dominance of billionaire tech bros is having on culture. Because what you said just a moment ago about that kind of spirit of, well, I'm going to do this show on Kenya or whatever it is because your judgment and your life and your experience, you want to create this. That's both art and journalism. You have to have that sovereignty and that independence to be able to put yourself out and trust that you're not chasing an audience. You're letting them come to you, right? In news, we call it news judgment, but it's something that you cultivate in any artistic practice too, of not trying to chase approval, but do what you need to do. The algorithm is erasing all of that. It's even shaping how we tell stories to begin with. Because now if you want to do well on Instagram or TikTok, you got to have that hook in the first, few seconds. And then your entire clip can't be over 90 seconds or 2 minutes because they throttle you. So, I feel kind of silly in a way that I went to graduate school for, how to do narrative nonfiction and long form journalism and how to tell stories in a way that draw them out and build tension and suspense. And now it's just about trying to dupe and trick and rile people up or surprise them. It's yellow journalism at best. So I think that race to the bottom it's literally rewiring us and what we should expect. What scares me is I think that a lot of younger folks coming up, they have no other frame of reference. And I think both of us, especially coming out of like heavy music and punk and hardcore, like, the value of the cassette or the 7-inch or the zine, or the picking something up at the show or at the tiny record store, right? And all the community and things that come with that spontaneity. And I think a lot of folks are just missing all of that because it's all through the algorithm. And for folks like us, I worry about that now. I came up writing at major media outlets. I'm now starting my own thing as well. But it's just, I think about this constantly. It's like, I've always tried to tell stories that both government and sometimes activists didn't want me to tell. I'm not doing it for that reason, but I have to be able to tell the story in the way I need. But now it feels like we have to chase the algorithm and chase the metrics before we can think about storytelling or truth.
AI is also ruining some of that too. I recently wrote about, we have a weekly, I call it a newsletter, but it's more like a weekly thought on the channel here. And everyone's using AI for
Mhm.
not everyone, but a lot of people are using AI, and some people are using it for their script writing for their little, like you said, TikTok
Oh,
videos. And
just the worst.
if
Yeah.
you don't know history because you've never read it, it's going to spit out what you put in. And if you're putting in trash, you're going to get some unbelievable trash. And
Yep.
we actually we have a special thing we do for patrons of the show. We go in the champagne room, and I showed the actual video that I wrote about, where this kid just was like, FDR was the worst president ever. and he killed all this. It was horrible. It was horrible. But it was obviously AI written. He didn't understand. He didn't read anything. He doesn't know history. And it's hard to tell someone like, hey, you're wrong here, because, your fans tell you something very differently. That's the hard part. Before we get deeper into ICE, I do want to talk a little bit about what radicalized you, because I think community is important. You come from the heavy music world in Texas?
In Texas.
In Dallas or Houston?
Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth area.
And then Austin for college, and stayed in the Republic of Austin a little bit. But yeah, born and raised in Fort Worth.
One of my favorite bands is from Texas, DRI.
No, of course. Yeah. Old school.
So they definitely have some interesting stories about.
We've got history.
Being from there and being weirdos, as they were called back in the day. What drew you to the music, and what about the music drew you to political action?
It was all mixed up together for me. And I think I was drawn to the music as much as I was drawn to the politics of the music. That was so I remember, this was like 7th grade. I was probably, or 8th grade, 13. Some friends' older brothers had Minor Threat, Gorilla Biscuits, Operation Ivy, you name it, Dead Kennedys. And so it was both like I'd never heard anything like that growing up in Texas. And I was in a small town, nobody in town. It was just that novelty and difference. But also the stuff they were talking about, we'd never heard anything about in school or in media. I thought I was well read. And so there's the kind of combination of the two. And then when I first went to some of my first punk and hardcore shows, both in Dallas, and then once I got to Austin, that really ramped up everything. Because I got to Austin, and I went to Austin largely for that. I looked at other journalism schools, like at University of Missouri, which was a great program. And we went there, and the tour guide, I was asking about music, and they had a venue with the Dave Matthews cover band. And I was like, "Nah, man, we got Texas
Columbia wasn't for
rock,
you."
and it was not for me." So, getting to Texas in Austin at that time was a really vibrant scene, for lack of a better word, and I kind of fell into all of it at the college radio station, and it was so intermixed with local activism and just all kinds of other things going on. So it was that for me. It was immediately community. Um, we'd go to shows several times a week. We had a little makeshift zine distro that we did ourselves, and we'd go set up tables. And it was just like, I never had anything like that. And I think there's so much if you look at how I've approached journalism, you can see the fingerprints of punk all over it. Everything has been DIY.
Mhm.
Right? No mainstream outlets would publish my reporting about environmentalists being labeled as terrorists. Even though I had the chops and I was writing for outlets of that caliber, I couldn't get the story out. And so finally I started, back in the day, it was a blog, and just published myself, called it a newswire. And it was that like punk ethic that really, in hindsight now, I can see it just shaped absolutely everything.
I find it fascinating to find out how people get radicalized, politicized, whatever word you want to use, especially when it comes from certain music scenes. As I've been, you probably don't know, is extremely critical of certain music scenes. because the way we were talking about, kind of influencers earlier, sometimes I see music scenes functioning in very similar capacities,
Certainly.
especially coming up. That's what I saw. That being said, you also were involved in the environmental movement, which isn't the first time we've seen state repression. That goes back before our
No.
grandparents were even born. Even when we talk about like deporting people for their political beliefs, that goes back to before there was a Red Scare. But let's just go back to the 90s. I don't want to go back to the turn of the century. If you just look at the 90s, to think that property damage is the biggest fear that the administration has under the watchful eye of Bill Clinton, who's supposed to be our savior from conservative repression. Tell me a little bit about what that was like, writing about I don't even want to call it eco-terrorism, environmental activism in the 90s.
Well, and it kind of segues perfectly with what we were just talking and riffing about with music, because it was that connected. That world that I was so drawn to was also kind of this, whatever metaphor, incubator, powder keg, whatever, where all of this energy was brewing. And there was a wave and an influx. There always has been in punk, an environmental and certainly anti-capitalist ethic, concern about animals, feminism. But in that era in particular, there were a lot of bands coming out that were forefronting this idea of environmental sabotage as well, using it in lyrics and graphics on T-shirts and 7-inch liners and stuff like that. And so it was entering culture and subculture in that way. And there was, at the same time, kind of the hippier side of things, was a really robust grassroots movement that was growing quickly and pretty boldly. So I think between those kind of punk and hippie influences were really the drivers in a lot of ways of the environmental movement in that period. And it was terrifying corporations, to the point where, even in going back just a little bit, in 1985, industry groups made up the term eco-terrorism. They openly invented the term to try to demonize this new movement that was coming up. And it didn't go very well for them, because in that time period, the headlines were about people hijacking planes and taking hostages, and the public's idea of terrorism was quite a bit different internationally. They kept at it. And then we entered that period in the 90s where activist groups are kicking things up a notch even more. There's burning SUVs, setting buildings on fire. There's logging equipment that's destroyed, property destruction, releasing animals from fur farms and laboratories. And so the industry is ramping up its lobbying efforts, both to government and to the FBI. And this is a long way of saying, when September 11th happened, it had been building through that late 80s, through the 90s. The 9/11 attacks occurred. And while the smoke was still, the rubble was literally smoldering, first responders were on the ground, people were being rescued, you had members of Congress publicly speculating it was the work of eco-terrorists. That is how kind of mind-blowing this all was. And a few years later, the FBI went so far, testified before Congress, and said publicly that environmental and animal rights activists are their number one domestic terrorism threat. Now, these groups had never harmed anyone. These were serious crimes. Arson is potentially very dangerous, obviously, but nobody's ever been harmed. Through that same period, in my first book, Green is the New Red, I talk about how the FBI was deliberately ignoring and downplaying the rise of white supremacist and far-right violence and militia violence. And I know it's kind of like, if folks listening to this aren't familiar with this may seem like a little far-fetched. I get disbelief all the time, but literally the FBI was complicit by focusing on environmentalists and other protest groups with this rise of far-right violence we see right now. The Inspector General's office even told them that. I found one report where the Justice Department Inspector General told the FBI, if you guys don't knock it off, people are going to die because far-right groups are getting bolder. And the FBI wrote back and said, no, we're going to focus on environmentalists and animal rights activists.
Wow.
To me, it felt like the biggest smoking gun. I try to shout it from the rooftop still. And people just didn't care, because at that time, and arguably it's still today, we can talk about how it shifted. Within FBI, DHS, Joint Terrorism Task Forces, everybody was trying to get a leg up. And you do that by going after the enemy of the hour and trying to arrest some punks and hippies and activists. That's a whole lot easier than going after Al-Qaeda.
I was going to say, isn't it easier to go after these cats too? Because they're going to help. They're going to say they're going to say crazy shit.
And they've been using informants. They entrap people into saying that crazy shit. The FBI has relentlessly depended on informants and cooperators, and they really haven't been able to land many convictions outside of that. And I flag that because when we think about ICE in some of these conspiracy cases we can talk about later, this is a bit of a shift that today it's less about going after the people who actually did X, Y, or Z. And we're entering an era where the conspiracy charge is growing, and this kind of round up wider net is really becoming the tactic we're seeing more often.
Does that speak to a conspiracy theorist mindset that we have? I mean, I'm sure part of it is all fear mongering at the end of the day, but we're not talking about RICO charges. But even if we are, let's pull back a little bit, and I'll use my pop culture. I'll put on my pop culture hat for a second. Sean P. Diddy Combs was...
I was not expecting you to go there, but I'm with you. Let's go.
I'll get in the car. I'm in the back seat, though. I don't know if I feel like riding shotgun with this one.
I'll be shotgun with you even.
Sean P. Diddy Combs was originally tried on RICO charges.
Yep.
My head spun around like Linda Blair when I first heard that, because I was like, that's a stretch. But he's not the first rapper to be charged with a RICO charge.
No, not at all.
There's another rapper in Atlanta that was getting hit with the RICO charge because of songs. It's a little different, but basically it's because of songs. Sean P. Diddy Combs was being charged for like sex trafficking and having this criminal enterprise. It's just a rich guy. It's just a rich guy being an asshole. That does happen. He did get arrested. He did end up getting charged, but not on a RICO. But there seems to be this need for these conspiracy charges. When you look at Prairie Land, it was insane, the charges that these people got, because ultimately you're charging people that outside of you can say the guy that shot the cops, like he shot a cop. He did shoot a cop. Like, we have to take everything. I think everything has to be put into context.
Sure.
We've been seeing law enforcement shoot people. We've been seeing law enforcement shoot press. Even with rubber bullets, it has been videoed and broadcast of press moving out of the way and being shot by law enforcement. Rubber bullets, still shot by law enforcement. There are people that have lost their eyes from law enforcement shooting them with quote unquote non-lethal rounds. So it's not a far-fetched idea that law enforcement may shoot non-combative protesters. It's scary out there. They brought guns. I've convinced me that it's not smart to bring guns to a protest in 2026. It's scary out there.
Yeah.
Renee Good was not a threat to anybody. Alex Preddy was not a threat to anybody. these people. That's just a few of the people. There's been more people that have been shot by ICE and another law enforcement. No weapon. It's scary out there. So you can say, well, there's a guy that shot the cop. Outside of that gentleman, everybody else, they set off some fireworks, moved a box, called somebody, relayed a message, and now you're involved in the conspiracy, and you may not even know fully what's going on. You went to a meeting, you went to a book club, and you got decades of time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a lot I would like to say about that. Let me start by saying, if I could, there's a personal, I'll say the lens through which I'm seeing some of this and what this conspiracy charge is. So like when that Prairie Lane, when those indictments came down, I was on the phone talking to several folks in the support group and talking over Signal. I have to wonder, as a journalist, they were asking me questions kind of about similar cases I've covered, reasonable questions for someone who's in the support group of people who are being charged with terrorism and conspiracy, to talk to someone who's written about that, right? So they're kind of asking questions or whatever. At what point is that part of the conspiracy? At what point is the journalism, just doing our work or doing any type of connection, even just checking in on your friend? At what, that's, and I shouldn't say at what point, because we are at that point. We are looping in people to these conspiracy charges based on that level of involvement. In the Prairie Land case, which for folks, if you don't know, there was a shooting at an ICE detention center. It culminated after a noise protest, which is very common among ICE protesters, also protests at prisons. Fireworks were set off. ICE agents and law enforcement described this as this Antifa massive plot. Everyone was involved in a conspiracy because they were in a Signal group together. They were in part of a book club together. Some of the folks didn't know each other. Some of them weren't even at the protest. And so there's so much we could talk about how bold and reckless the government is here. One of the things, though, I'd like to convey, even if you're just kind of on board with this general climate and not that concerned with what we're seeing right now, conspiracy charges historically are intended to go after folks like in the mob, which is where RICO originated, because existing statutes were seen as limiting because of how they operated. As a result, conspiracy charges often, and I think should be, significantly less in terms of a prison sentence than someone that's actually doing the thing that was the conspiracy. Like, I don't know, like the far right has tried to assassinate judges, murder doctors who are providing abortions, things like that. In Prairie Land, we have people that were sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison and up for doing things like transporting a box of zines, which the government called insurrectionary materials, because they talked about anarchist ideas and anti-ICE ideas. This is the climate we're in. And it's chilling. And I think people hear this. I put up a short thing the other day, or not the other day, a few weeks ago, that people hear this and they're like, oh, that can't stand up in court. That can't be possible. Right? But there are a lot of folk, we're talking about that disconnect earlier in people's head in the sand. I think this is part of it. Oh, the courts are going to stop that. I have an affiliation with the law school. The courts are going to stop it. No. The courts haven't been stopping this for decades. So now we're reaching a point where it really is that bad. 30, 50, the gentleman you talked about that was sentenced to 100 years in prison for the shooting. It was a shot that was a ricochet. And, and I'm not in the business of trying to defend any defendants for any type of accused activity. Military veteran, you were, I think, right on the nose saying it's dangerous out there right now. I know that as a journalist, people know that as a protester. Whether or not you agree with people carrying firearms, it is within their right,
It was in
certainly in the state of
Texas.
Texas. Like, this is how we were
Shh,
raised.
That's
But
oh, it's
more
in
broadly, though,
Texas.
it's in Texas. This is how hypocritical these folks are, how bootlickers they are. That it's come and take it. We will never give up our
Yeah,
firearms.
yeah.
But if you use your right to bear
It's
arms,
a terrorist attack. I listened
line
to
them up against the wall, 100 years in prison. Yeah.
I listened to the NPR. Uh, they did a 4 or 5 part story on Prairie Land, which I thought was pretty good because they actually talked to some of the snitches.
Mhm.
And I have to use that word with kind of quotations around it because even those people got pretty long sentences. It wasn't like they got, probation. Just
Mhm.
got like 9-10 years, some of them. And all they didn't even know what to tell because their involvement was so kind of far from the action, if you will. But hearing about the actual shooting and not just the ricochet, it was like the guy was shooting towards someone because the officer, who I believe he testified to this, had his sights set on a protester
Yeah. Sights raised.
who was running away from him.
Mhm.
So he was going to shoot a protester. When a group of protesters get pulled over by the police, they see guns in their car, which weren't at the protest, and they go, "This is a what did they say? This is a terrorist act right here. We got to stop these guys." And that was on the cops' camera, and the judge let them keep that in court. They didn't strike that statement. I think that's somewhat prejudicial. There are people that believe that the police have some sort of sixth sense and know the difference between good old boys with guns and what terrorist
Mhm.
looks like. I don't know what that looks like. I don't, because that all boils down to what's in your heart.
And skin color. Yeah, sure.
Is
And, you
that
know, and
yeah,
then,
that could play a
and
role.
also the,
That could play a
you know,
role.
they also brought up, hey, everybody there was wearing black. They'd said this was part of the conspiracy. So, they find ways of proving our confirmation bias, seeing what they want to see.
What
But you
scared
know
me
what?
the Go ahead,
Oh,
go ahead. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Will, you finish.
Well, I was just gonna, hearing you say that. What scares me so much about it is look at what Alex Purdy and Renee Good, and after they were murdered by ICE, Alex Purdy using his phone, his camera, and documented was described by Christy Nome and Pam Bondi as violence.
Mm.
Showing up to protest with firearms, but showing up to protest also described as violence, also a terrorist threat. The camera got Alex Purdy killed. 50, 100 years in prison, no cameras, but do you see what I'm saying? How does
Yeah.
this all shake out? Like, what is the message we're supposed to receive here as good citizens, right? Good law abiding
There's
citizens. What
no
is the message we're supposed to hear? What is the right course of conduct? And if I'm going to get murdered
Mhm.
for documenting and bearing witness, I grew up in Texas. I got guns. Why should I not be carrying them at an event? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand the rationale.
Two things. If we go back into our DeLoreans to the year of our Lord 2017 to Charlottesville,
Mhm.
the far right protesters that were saying the Jews will not replace us, not all of them, bless you, but a good amount of them were armed. A few people shot at protesters. They didn't hit anybody. They still shot at protesters. Those protesters were not armed in Charlottesville. Was it 71? We have Kent State.
Mhm.
Right before that, there was Jackson State. There was a shooting there as well. You have the National Guard shooting college kids. And there's a moment where the government is having kind of a reckoning with their violence. We still don't know
Mhm.
about COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
But to me, two things have changed. Number one, You don't need COINTELPRO anymore. You just go out and do it.
Yep.
Sorry, it's not that secretive, guys.
It doesn't need to be.
They don't need to be. And number two, the government can just shoot people now, and there's nothing to see here. That's what it feels like to me. I feel like there's a Kent every week.
Mm.
And the response is nothing to see here. Enemy combatants, they had Antifa in their heart. And the way to tamp down what you got in 2020, and a lot of things happened for 2020. You can't replicate COVID and shelter in place and all the horrible shit that we were kind of subject to all at the same time. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and then kind of culminating with George Floyd, right? And all that's happening in this moment where we're finally reckoning with the racist past. We have our issues with 1619 and even BLM, but you can't deny the fact that conversations were changing the way we thought about race and white supremacy. Maybe there was, you could argue there was an overcorrection in some forms of media and even academia. But the bottom line is there was it felt like an ideological shift.
Mm-hmm.
And then, everything catches on fire for a few months and you can point your finger at the Trump administration. I mean, he sat there and kept pouring gasoline on the fire. But they weren't criminalizing ideas. And this time around, like listening to the Prairie Land case, reading as much as I can find about it, what I'm getting from it is we understand that there's no head of Antifa. We don't give a shit.
Exactly.
If you have it in your heart, then you're guilty. And that's what's scary to me that we didn't even see in the environmental movement. It's what do you feel? It's a crime. So everybody on board with, we can't even call it the capitalist project, right? Everybody on board with the fascist projects. If not,
100%.
we got a gulag for you in Uganda you can sit in. Do you feel similarly?
Very much. I mean, I think this is the defining kind of threshold. It feels like we've crossed every red line at this point, and I always wonder, like, what else is there? What's going to be the next one that just feels like a bridge too far? This feels definitive to me. Just as someone who's covered political repression around the world for so many years, is that we've shifted to openly, proudly criminalizing ideology. If you look at the environmental cases, the animal rights cases, there was all this rhetoric. They were described as anti-civilization, anti-human, all those kind of like bigger, trumped up, pumped up narratives. But at the end of the day, most of the cases in the investigations had to have some nexus to criminal activity. And I think that's disappearing now. Of course, Prairie Land, there was that predicate act, there was a shooting. But in Cop City and Minnesota and all these cases, I don't think that's even relevant anymore. And I would even go a little bit further. If you look at NSPM-7, the National Presidential Memo, in the way it's talking about anti-fascists, what was, the red alarms to me throughout that document was its emphasis on funding and institutional support. Now, when you're talking about kind of 2020 and George Floyd and the kind of uprising in Ferguson, all of this bubbling up, I think this we can see as one of the key takeaways for the Trump administration from that period is that, yeah, we can tamp down the unrest in the streets, but what they were also so concerned about was the widespread popular support and public support from more mainstream elements. This is saying we're going after the mainstream elements, and they already are. I mean, there's a case against the Southern Poverty Law Center,
I
which
saw that.
oh, dude, what a bonkers, truly
This
bonkers case.
for those that don't know, the Southern Poverty Law Center, um, an organization I donated to when I had money, actually fights far right extremism
Mhm.
and have been doing it forever. A lot of what I know about far right extremism is from the memos that come out of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And one of the people that was a lawyer, was she a lawyer?
Mhm.
That worked for the SPLC, just got picked up on charges. What was the charge that she got picked up on again?
Oh, they're going after because they're saying they would Southern Poverty Law Center hires and works with researchers and lawyers as informants. They will investigate and infiltrate far right groups.
Yeah.
The government is arguing that by doing that, they were aiding and abetting the far right, and they were also defrauding. The fraud case is the heart of this, from what I can tell here, and I'm not super well read on the filings, but they're going after her as fraud, like that she was misrepresenting. And I think you saw someone left a comment. She was the chief financial officer. They're saying that she was misrepresenting and defrauding the donors. People are donating to Southern Poverty Law Center for the same reason that you were, because they're exposing what the far right is doing. One of the crazier aspects about this to me, and why this is so dangerous, is based on my reporting. Years and years ago, I was very critical of Southern Poverty Law Center and other groups because they were kind of feeding the beast of government intelligence with sham information. There's kind of trumped up reports on so-called eco-terrorism. So even though they were focused and kind of sounding the alarm at the far right, they're saying, hey, this is another new type of terrorism that the government should go after. And it was just like, you guys are going to get bit in the ass on this. Like, if you think it's okay to just throw the environmentalists to the wolves and the authoritarians and get locked up and treated as terrorists, you're not going to be safe. I testified before Congress saying exactly that other groups were going to be at risk. Now, that's exactly what has happened. We've reached the era where the Trump administration is so emboldened that they're going after NGOs that have for decades been collaborating and trying to work with law enforcement. That's the state where we're in. And it's just chilling. Between that and their emphasis on Soros and funding, and tax exempt status, I think this is kind of the next phase we're already seeing, but I expect it to be ramping up, of going after NGOs and their
Going after
finances.
universities. We had some
Universities.
we
Yep.
had some Harvard professors on that wrote a book about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, 250 years of America, and all the law, not all, but I think the majority of the law department wrote 1,000-word essay. It's like 60 essays. It's pretty interesting. A lot of different fields and ideologies, but I think the through line is we all are tired of the Trump administration fucking with the Constitution. And we're talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center and Prairie Land, but that's not the only place where protesters have been arrested for ultimately protesting. Tell us a little bit about Minnesota. No one's really talking about that as much. New York Times did a piece about Minnesota.
New York Times did a piece. It's starting to get out a little bit more. This is part and parcel with all of that. It's connected to Prairie Land, to Cop City, to the similar arrests out in Washington State, all over the country. But this is part of the government's effort through NSPM-7, which, by the way, instructed law enforcement and FBI and justice to bring together all of these agencies. And right now, I believe it was a 10 or 20 agency department as part of the funding omnibus that's being proposed, of trying to get more and more money. They're holding conferences about this, but they're going after people that were documenting what ICE agents are doing.
Mhm.
They were on signal chats. They were alerting their neighbors. There was a public spectacle roundup, a show of force for more than a dozen of these community activists. Some of the charges have already kind of dropped out. Some of them are still going. The key takeaway about this case and so many others is the government is trying to rewrite the narrative so that the people who are on camera murdering our neighbors, kidnapping our neighbors into vans and unmarked cars off the street with masks, sending them to undisclosed locations in atrocious conditions, sometimes children having to represent themselves before a judge. All this
Mhm.
is happening, and the government is trying to rewrite the narrative so that the people with the cameras are actually the dangerous ones. And the reason I'm so concerned about this in my recent book, Little Red Barns, is how journalism and investigations and photography of animal agriculture became criminalized as
Yeah.
terrorism. And I see a very parallel, if not identical, dynamic that, for instance, right now, by the end of September, we're being told that all ICE agents should have body cameras. So the government is saying, hey, 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 we're trying to prosecute these people for cameras. You should let us have the cameras. We'll wear the cameras. We'll keep you safe. Right? It's this classic co-optation of citizen advocacy and the power of sight and saying, no, no, no. When the people do that, that's violence and that's terrorism. But when we record it, we should be trusted.
It's
And I
nice,
think
right?
we're at a
Neighborly.
real,
Yeah.
it is, but and it's so tempting to believe that because it seems like if they're all recording all the time, they would be careful about what they do, right? And they would fear repercussions. But the data shows about police body cameras, which the Obama administration was gung ho about, and we
Mhm.
spent hundreds of millions of dollars nationally, didn't do jack. They literally, the New York Times and other outlets had massive investigations. They did not lead to accountability. The tapes are often not released. And when they are, nobody is held accountable. So this is kind of the era we're entering here of us trying to document what power does is itself terrorism, but them documenting and then withholding everything they do to us and documenting our faces and putting it in databases is national security.
It's it's insane to think that, uh, I think we all understand, right? If there was more, let's go back to Rodney King. When Rodney
Mhm.
King happened, it was like now everyone's going to see what they do to us
Yep.
and they can't do it ever again. And nothing happens to the cops because if you watch it, we're going to show it again so many times. Um, I believe the first time they show the video in for the jury, all the jury members start crying. Few months in, the 100th time they saw that video, nobody cared.
Yep.
You show it enough times, okay, well maybe maybe he was driving really fast and shouldn't have drove that fast and deserved that horrible ass whooping until an inch of his life. But we saw the ass whooping with Rodney King. A area burned,
Mhm.
and years later we say, well, maybe cops need cameras. Cops will beat your ass on camera and then watch it later for fun.
Oh, that's been exposed, as you know. They'll circulate the footage and make jokes about it. There have been
Kicking your
cases
ass
about
on
this.
camera,
Absolutely.
that's like a TikTok video for them.
Yep.
It's getting you. The camera is not going to save you from an ass whooping. If anything, much like the camera in the real world, it may encourage an ass whooping.
Well,
We
in
are
more
in a
ways than one, too.
right.
Right? No, but really,
Yeah.
it might encourage that physical ass whooping, but it's also an ass whooping in terms of this is just a mass surveillance tool. It's not, it's being sold to us as accountability, just like the flock cameras are being sold to us as like, well, it's going to help the police do their jobs. No, it is not.
Mm.
Like, this is helping them collect more data about us to repress us. That's the point of the body cameras. And, it just really came home to me with that, the recent book I was talking about, that there's this difference between sight and oversight that we get lost on. I think
Mhm.
we believe that if we have sight, that somebody behind the curtain is going to deal with the bad people. But that doesn't mean there's oversight, and it doesn't mean there's agency. And I think that's what we're realizing now, both with ICE, and I see this a parallel with Gaza. We have all of this, we have no power over it. We don't
Is,
feel like we have any oversight agency, and it's just
is
so
that,
soul
that's what
crushing.
does it feel like that to you? Where I
Which
love the
part?
Wizard. I love the Wizard of Oz. I can watch it a million times and a million times more. I love it. Cry at the end. I'm a sap. I don't care what you say. Love the Wizard of Oz. But now we get to Oz and we pull back the curtain and there's just no one there.
Mhm.
Like it feels frightening in that when you see people recording ICE and they pull out a gun and go, what are you going to do? That's the ultimate, kind of punking somebody. Like, what are you
Mhm.
going to do about it? You going to hit me? Because if you hit me, we're going to shoot you. We got nothing to lose,
Yep.
and you have everything to lose. We're gonna beat shit out of you. If we don't shoot you, we'll detain you for as long as we want. This is civil detention. It's not criminal detention. Quite
Mhm.
different. There is no court appointed lawyer you get in civil detention.
Mhm.
So we can move you around. We can hold you for an ungodly amount of hours. Like, you have no rights. So how do you want to handle this tough guy? And that feels like what we're getting. Gaza, to your point, is functioning the same way. You can get in the streets all you want, and shit really going to change.
Nope. To me, it is the rubbing our nose in it in a way.
Yes.
It's like a really dystopian, brutally violent in its enforcement of just trying to grind into us, you can't do anything. And to the Wizard of Oz point, I think if we see behind the curtain, there's folks there, but it's Democrats and Republicans, and there's a whole bunch of them, right? It's not some
Are they all
omnipotent.
just sitting around staring at their navel? They're
It's
not
a
even
little
pulling
bit. We're
levers.
just like, well, I don't want to stop
Yeah.
this. Well, I don't know. That might be bad for our polling numbers if we come out too strong against any of this. And so it's just like cowardice.
Yeah.
And that's what it is striking me so much these days. It's just like there's evil without a doubt. You see Stephen Miller, you see some of the architects
Yeah.
of this stuff, I believe are truly evil people and dangerous people that we need to treat on the level of those authoritarians we know throughout history. But at the same time, so much of it is just people are too afraid or is self-invested or narcissistic or I don't know what to even speak up against it. Um, and now you see some of the Democrats taking a more progressive shift. You have some of the socialists coming up, and other Democrats are the ones trying to take them down. So I don't know what they're
That,
doing behind the curtain, but they're
yeah.
just
Yeah.
they're all sharing a pizza, hanging out together, and just buddy
That's-
buddies. I mean, we kind of saw that in the Epstein files too, right? It's like they're all hanging out together.
Everybody's hanging out.
They're all behind the
Jeffrey
curtain.
Epstein. That's where he's got the best parties.
Yep.
Um, it's. I hate to just say it's a frightening time, but it's one of these. You had said something at the end of that podcast that I thought was very pragmatic. I thought was very astute, and I felt like if you repeat that on this show, someone's probably going to call you a name, like he's an incrementalist, he's a this, but using again my love of Star Wars and the expanded universe. Say what you want about Disney, but I do like Andor. And if you don't like it, you can fuck right off. Right? I love Rogue One.
Mhm.
You also can fuck right off if you don't like those movies. I think it puts into perspective what goes into A New Hope. You can't just have A New Hope in a vacuum. There has to be years of defeat. There takes time to build that movement. How does it get built? Right? To get to the point where you can get to even Rogue One, right? And when you had said at the end of that Resist Fascism podcast, you're like, this is a time for us right now to try to figure out how to stave off this threat from the right and kind of retreat a bit and protect the little bit of democracy that we have left. Because I feel we're in a constant defensive position right now because we're getting hammered from a lot of different angles. As angry as one wants to get about immigration, as you should be, there's also Gaza. That's one place.
Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we're not even talking about Burma, Myanmar.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I always say it wrong. I feel rude. So there's multiple genocide. Cuba, no one talks about. Venezuela, no one talks about. No one talks about Argentina. Like there's a lot of problem. Colombia, and they just had a crazy earthquake. Like there's a lot going on that's going to affect the United States of America. And it feels like it's all happening at once. It's overwhelming. And while this is all, God forbid you try to eat and buy groceries. And while this is going on, you're trying to protect, you know, the little bit of rights that you have. And I think people can either get overwhelmed and, you know, online, everybody's the toughest of tough guys. But this is kind of a time to really assess what we can do, what we should be doing, where our focuses should be beyond just the electoral realm. And I don't know if too many people are doing that because, you know, what you do when all this is going on is just you just retreat to watch the show.
Yep.
So I don't know.
No, I'm struggling with that as well. I feel like the challenge we face right now, when it's just such an onslaught, you know, the scale of any one of those is just it's so staggeringly, crushingly bad. I mean, like I've been open about struggling for many years related to my work with depression and PTSD, and even if you don't, like, it's hard not to just feel like we're drowning in this. But I think that we have to recalibrate in some ways right now. We have to maintain the big vision about where we're going, the type of world that we're trying to build. I think that's the only way we can actually motivate folks at the end of the day. We have to have something we're working towards in addition to what we're resisting and fighting. But we also have to be smart about the punches that we're throwing right now and how we're able to defend them and what our capacity is. And so it's a difficult line to walk in conversations because I feel like people want to, like you said, either go straight into tough guy mode, which, let's be real, like, you want to talk like that. And like I said, I'm a firearms guy. I understand people supported that, but like, let's be honest about where we're at right now. Like, let's please, like, people say up in their chest about like, oh, that's okay, let it get bad. We'll see this kind of like action hero narrative. It's like, bless your heart. Like, bless your heart. You have no concept of what actual violence like that is like. You've never seen it. You've never been around it. You've never talked to people that've been around it. And like, that is not what this is right now. This is we can still speak out. The risks are getting higher, but we can still do this. So we need to still be doing this. We also need to be thinking about those next few levers that I talked about. And then it's almost like, what was it? The Rube Goldberg, the elaborate kind of pinball machines.
Yeah, like
it feels like that, right? Like, okay, when are these idiots going to drop the duck with the beak that knocks the other thing? There's just this dystopian mess that they're making. But I think we have to be thinking that way. Like, okay, prairie land should be a wake up call. It doesn't mean stop doing the work. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean disavow your ideology, but it does mean, okay, that needs to get filed away so we have a shared understanding of what the risks actually are, because that conversation is recalibrating what it means to support folks who've been targeted for 50, 100 years. We need to talk about that capacity. We need to talk about like what risks we can individually take. And I'm not saying this, it's not incrementalism to me. This is survivalism. Like I am very open. Like I want people who are alive in this moment to understand you have a commitment potentially for the rest of your life to be in this fight. Like this is what the level that we're at right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about fighting back fascism, but like assuming we can beat back enough of this where we maintain civil society, we have ecological collapse here. We have truly late stage capitalism. Like we got a lot of work to do. So we need you to sustain and protect yourself in this fight now so that we can keep this going. Um, I don't know the best way of going about all of that other than to try to do what we're doing in this conversation and what I do in my work is I talk about political repression so that people are more informed and can be more strategic in their adversarial position against fascism. Because I think I'll say this, this is my true hope right now that if nothing else, this can be a moment where we are so overwhelmed with how bad it is that we have to stop a lot of the bullshit that we've done for decades across social movements, the infighting, the gossiping, the just cannibalizing each other. If we can dial that down enough to work with people that, okay, we're not 100% on board, but maybe we got 80% or at 85, like that's a huge win against people that literally want to line us up against the wall and exterminate us. And I just hope that we have enough of these conversations that we can get more people to that point of being like, all right, man, like you're not down with whatever exact politics I have, but we have to defend ourselves together and we have to figure out how we're getting through this or
I,
else we're all cooked.
I feel like if people understood it, number one, I think if people understood how the immigration system works mildly, like all you need to know is these are criminals. It's like, well, if it's criminal, why is it a civil matter? It's a civil matter. You don't get appointed an attorney. There's a reason why little kids are representing themselves in court as young as 3 years old because it's a civil matter. Civil detention is not criminal detention. You have more rights in criminal detention than you do in civil detention. There's a reason why all these things are happening. There's a reason why Congress feels hard for them to get in there to find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's civil. And that alone, I think, is a wake-up call to a lot of people. I believe you were from Texas. I have been to Texas more times than I can count.
Probably more than you'd like. But yeah.
I've been to parts of Texas like there's a city named what? Right. I've met enough people in my journeys through this beautiful planet, especially in the United States, that believe in these ideas of freedom of speech and their Second Amendment, and this is a great country. I really believe that a lot of these people don't know why they think the country is great. They don't know how laws function. There's a few people that are, to some degree, the QAnon people, the Jeffrey Epstein thing was for them, kind of a victory. But for a lot of people, you had to wake up and go, okay, well, these crazy people were onto something a little bit about how despicable these elites were. But most people believe in this idea that you can pursue happiness through individual greatness, right? You're going to go to school, get a job. Like, what's that horrible movie that wasn't true? The Hot Cheeto movie, right?
Oh,
Everyone,
yeah.
yeah, an immigrant who's a janitor. He really was a janitor. Really was an immigrant. He really didn't have I think he had a 7th grade education. He really did become an executive. He didn't create hot Cheetos, but that's not the point. He really did become an executive. So people believe in these ideas. If you work hard, if you do the right things, you deserve the fruits of that. And to see people that did all those things literally getting arrested, taking their kids to school, going to work, taking a family member to a cancer treatment, they're paying their taxes. I think that might be the thing that unites the country. This idea that in its 250th year, where this current administration had a UFC fight on the White House lawn, that maybe there's something important enough for you to wear that dumb fucking American flag t-shirt on the weekends when you go to some outlet mall. That there's something there for you to fight for. I keep some hope.
I do too. I'll temper it. This is what you get me happy on, Jason. I will temper your hope with a little bit of cynicism. let's take it down a little notch. Because what's wild to me, I think you're spot on. That that is this shared value, but I'm imagining that type of audience, and they will embrace things like due process, but they don't know what due process is.
Exactly.
Right. So I saw this great, some influencer made a clip interviewing some of these folks, pro-ICE protesters, and they're saying, well, what if they stop you? Like, shouldn't you be able to show your ID and your birth certificate so that, to make sure we're not arrested? And they're like, yeah, of course. You show your birth certificate, that's not what this is about. And the interviewer was like, that's due process. Like, that's part of the process. You have a right to show evidence to your defense to get yourself out of situations. So I think you're both right, but there's work to be done, because it's not just media literacy, civics literacy. I feel like people don't understand civil versus criminal. I think most people have no idea of the difference. They don't understand things like grand juries, which come up in activist cases, where you can be imprisoned, and people have, going back to the Black Panthers and even earlier than that, for refusing to snitch on your people. Mm-hmm. Right? I think if we took some of this and changed how we speak about it and who we were speaking to, and I'm looking in particular in the mirror at folks like me, if you grew up in states like this, if you can pass in states like this, if you've got lighter skin, if you're in rural communities where you might have an in to talking to some of your neighbors that might be on the verge like this, you need to make this case that whatever they thought they were signing up for, now it's a field day on all of us. Being a citizen, being whatever protected status you thought you had, doesn't exist anymore. And due process itself is disappearing. These values that you're waving your made in China Walmart flag for, as you said, are totally disappearing.
You would hope it would be something to get people upset about, because whenever I see the Tucker Carlsons on TV talking about democracy and the government spending too much money supporting Israel, which is really code for him saying, I hate the Jews.
It absolutely is. Yeah. But that was a clever move that they've done, by the way. The far right just taking it's all the Jews and being like, hey, we're critical of genocide.
The Jews?
That's a novel idea. Let's talk about that.
And then you see people like Tucker Carlson saying things that AOC would never say. It's like, still, it seems a little Jews on the brain to me, but
very much.
Keep that to me.
But it's part of the psyop, man. It's like they're such vultures. And the far right's always done this. They just want to come pick at the remnants of whatever they can, whoever they can, and they'll say anything they need to in the moment. And so it's really terrifying to see folks being duped for some of that right now. Because like we have to be willing to talk to people on the other side, but we also have to realize folks that are just saying things to try to get our support so they can manipulate us and consolidate power.
And it's, dude, right now, if you are a journalist of note like yourself, and again, thank you for taking the time to come on.
I don't know if I'd go that far, man. I feel like I'm screaming in the void these days, but I appreciate that.
Every time I watch someone that is mildly left of liberal, it's do you support Hamas?
Yeah.
It's like, what? I came over here to talk about Christmas, but do you support Hamas?
You know, and it makes me feel a little silly, for lack of a better word, of how, you know, my whole adult life has been warning about people being labeled as terrorists, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Like it's going to go to the mainstream. All of this decades, I truly never thought people non-violently protesting a live streamed genocide would be criminalized as terrorists around the world. Like that is, so for what it's worth, for folks listening to this and are just shocked and feel like don't know what, like this is my beat. This is my world. And I feel like I got blindsided by that. I just didn't think it would ever be politically, like, how is this politically feasible?
Because we've been saying
it just is baffling.
Yeah, you've been saying probably since the moment you found out about how Israel and Palestine function. It's like, well, that doesn't seem right. And, no. Right? We're not all Ta-Nehisi Coates. Oh, yeah. Take that. Sorry, but I don't think you need to go there to be like, oh, maybe I was wrong about. Oh, fuck right on. But
no, you saw it right away, and you're like, apartheid's fucked. No,
you saw an image,
like, it's not, like, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're an extremist. That means you still have some empathy left in your body.
But now it's, and I don't know if that's working with the American public the way it could have worked before October 7th. I think before October 7th, you don't really understand how things function out there. They're doing horrible shit. We don't hear about it outside of, like you said, Amy Goodman or like the Grey Zone. Like very few people are talking electronic intifada. There's not too many people talking about what goes on in between Israel and Palestine that much. And then this thing happens where you're seeing it constantly on your social media feed. And you kind of have to give some props to, and I don't want to give it props, but that changeover in Twitter, where they just let everything go, is a big reason why you're seeing all the live streaming of things like genocides, because Elon Musk just, he took the governor off and just let it fly. And through that, I think people, even if you didn't understand it, you knew that I think kids dying is a bit extreme. And you can hold, well, they killed this many people on October 7th. It's like, yeah, that's really horrible, but you are blowing up entire cities.
Yep.
You can't, we learned that after 9/11. Most Americans were not on board. So you had to convince us that there was this thing that we have that the world wants. I think that still works to a certain degree with a certain kind of person. But overall, most people believe that there's bad people and good people. Yeah. And they want the good people to get the bad people. And you can't just say, well, the bad people are hiding underneath the good people, so we have to kill everyone. That just does not fly in the Western world the way it flies in Israel.
And I think there's only so long that the public is able, or segments of the public can even entertain the possibility of that while we're being bombarded with this, if that makes sense. So, like, for instance, on this recent book tour and doing a lot of college events, young people that when I was coming up, to be vocal about Palestine, like you said, it's seen as more kind of radical in a way. Like you're making a very firm commitment about an issue that a lot of people don't bother to know anything about. Like in the 80s, I remember growing up and little kids would just be like, peace in the Middle East is a thing you say,
Yeah.
right? Nobody has any, it's just like, oh, peace, peace. We want them all to stop fighting. And now on college campuses, I would have sorority students and fraternity guys and business majors, and not to be judgmental or stereotypical, but not like who I would expect. And they are fired up and outraged and just truly heartbroken and trying to cope with the amount of grief of what it means that we're all collectively watching this. What does that mean for us of who we are as a species? Like, what does it mean to keep going when you're a 22-year-old college student thinking about the future? What future is there if this is what all the adults are going along with? You know what I mean? And so I think, I hope, and the polling numbers are showing that, both within Democratic Party stuff that's come out, some of recent elections, of course, in Michigan and in New York, how vocal some folks are being about Palestine as a deciding issue. So I hope so, but it's also the PR and propaganda apparatus of that. I don't think people grasp how huge it is, of hundreds of millions of dollars in bots and engagement and influencers, and the fact that empathy is surviving and turning into rage despite that bombardment is something I would say we should have hope about right now for sure.
I try to have a little bit of hope, man.
I do too. You know,
I want
despite my cynicism,
yeah,
like, and not
I
in
try.
a
Yeah.
cheap way, in a gimmicky way, but in the, in the sense of the word, as in faith. Like, we have to, what do we have faith in? We have to have faith in each other and our
Mhm.
ability to solve problems. Like, I always used to hate the word hope. Because to me, it's not doing the thing.
Yeah.
It felt passive.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we just hope this works out. And I'm like, no, we gotta fight. We gotta do work. And now I'm starting to understand it more of like, no, we need to believe in our capacity to overcome this. It doesn't mean it's just gonna happen, but like, hope means we believe and have faith in ourselves that we can rise to this.
I guess we have to watch Rogue One again for another movie night.
I'm gonna get Andor keyed up. I might put that on my gym playlist or something. That hypes me up a lot.
It's you know, I found this movie totally on accident. I'll leave with this, and maybe you've seen it. You seem like a smart guy that's seen movies that I definitely have not seen. I spent my years watching everything Troma put out, and
I did a lot of that too.
Cinemax
Toxic
movie.
Avenger, yeah, the
Yeah,
classics.
yeah. Found a movie called Punishment Park. Have you ever seen it?
Yes,
You've seen?
yes. I love that you know this.
Never fucking heard of it until last night. We're doing a movie night, and we had watched a movie called Relentless from 1989 with Judd Nelson, where he plays this serial killer. And after we're done, one of the guys that watches movies with us worked in Hollywood. He actually made a documentary about the Athens music scene in the early 80s. It's called Athens Inside and Out, I believe is what it's called. So B-52s and REM and all these bands are in it, right? And we're going through these movies, and someone says, that movie Punishment Park looks interesting. I was like, what the fuck is that? So I see it, and I hover over it, and I click it. 1971. And it's about a real act, that the McCarran Act is a real act. And they're arresting radicals and giving people this choice. You can go to prison or you can go to Punishment Park, where it's kind of like a, what's that movie that people, Hunger Games, like a Hunger Games type thing. Yep. But it's 1971 film. And I found the concept fascinating, because I'm like, wow, this is 1971. This is when all the shit is really going down. And the movie got pulled so quickly. How did you come across this film?
Oh, I'm obsessed with dystopian books and also films. So I went down a rabbit hole a few years ago. First with literature, going back to books like We and some of the Russians and like
Mhm.
Soviet writers, and then that it came up on one of these like roundup lists of movies by that kind of genre. And not only was it, I found it fascinating because yeah, it drew from the McCarran Act from the 1950s that was used in this to prosecute dissidents and people as communists to ruin people's lives. And then in addition to that, the film is talking about like anti-war protesters. If I remember this right, it was a few years ago, but there were some of the ones that were in the
Yeah.
being drawn into the
Black
camp in
power
part,
people.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Black power people, and these are all the people that were being actively targeted by COINTELPRO. So it was quite prescient in a couple of ways. Obviously, it's it's supposed to be overwritten to make the point, but it's also true to form and not overwritten in a lot of other ways that I thought was kind of chilling. And I think that's why it didn't have a good run too, because I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot, especially with this like dystopian genre. I think something about fiction makes it a little bit easier for us to comprehend and digest, but the
Mhm.
fiction has to be really several steps removed. I think that's why like The Hunger Games works in terms of film and story, right? Because it's like, oh, this is like this post-apocalyptic. There's a war, and they're throwing kids to make them fight each other. Oh, this is crazy. You get a little too close to what the government's actually doing of maintaining lists, targeting the subversives, trying to destroy social movements. People are being shot in the street. Around this time, we had Dr. King, MLK, Kennedy's being shot. Like, there's a lot that I think this was just a little too much. But I think it's becomes relevant again, what, over 50 something years later, because they're talking about lists in this kind of psychopathic way. And, under NSPM-7, the government is being really vocal and transparent about some of them are even saying we need to round up the leftists. Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller
Yeah.
made some outrageous comments.
Yes.
These are you Stephen Miller said you can see and identify these people just on how they look. Now, there's a lot coded into that based
Yeah.
on race and perhaps being trans, because the administration's trying to go after trans folks so hard and all this. But it's also like kind of blue haired liberal, whatever you
Mhm.
want to think. But they're like, you can see these people. They're enemies. They hate everything that we love. And shit, man, like that is on a pathway that is setting up a dystopian film. Like, I don't know how else to see this right now. Those are the first few, like, backstory slides of a Hunger Games
Yeah.
scenario of how we got to that point.
I mean, Renee Good, right? She's got
Yeah,
crazy hair. I'm
yeah,
sure that guy didn't know her marital. So I think her wife was there, upset, but he couldn't have known the ins and outs of her life and this, that, and the third. But I think
yeah,
when he shoots her, he says, "Fucking bitch."
yep,
'Cause she crazy hair, so she fit the profile of a mouthy
and
woman.
her life had no value because of that, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Yeah, which is why I'm gonna when we hang up here, I'm gonna go watch that movie, Punishment Park, 'cause we started maybe 5 minutes of it, 10 minutes of it, last night, and I was like, "I think I need to watch this movie and write
You
about
might need
it."
a can I recommend a chaser after that too, Jason? Like, you might need a well, let's think of the dumbest, most apolitical thing you could put
Oh,
on
that's everything
afterwards.
I watch, dude.
Okay, let's say
Everything I fucking watch.
I
Don't you
have
don't you
I've
worry about it.
implemented a no Nazi on the weekend rule because I found all the media I consume is somehow like these themes come up. So I'm just like, okay, like my girlfriend and I have been watching British Bake Off. It's just
It's
like
just
we have to
anything that
anything.
what I there's 2 things I can watch, and this will date me so bad. Mr. Show, starring David
Oh
Cross,
yeah.
Bob Odenkirk. Um, Strangers with Candy, Amy
Okay.
Sedaris, and Stephen
You can put
Colbert.
kids in the hall in that mix too.
I can't get that for free here. These are things
Oh,
I can
okay.
get for free down here in Mexico. And
Gotcha.
what's the show with the vampires? What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show.
Oh, I didn't know if you were talking about Buffy. Yeah, what we do in the shadows.
No, What We Do in the Shadows. I can see those things for free down here, and that
Nice.
is the
That's an
palate cleanser,
appropriate
I guess you
cleanse. Yeah, I think that's good.
of silliness. Or I have an array of ridiculous movies that make no sense whatsoever. That
I mean, but this is, you know, not to get all serious about it, but that's like what we were talking about before. This is endurance. Like if you need to, for folks listening to this after you listen to our long conversation about all this horrible stuff, if you need to veg out and watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer or What We
fucking
Do in
do
the
it.
Shadow, just you got to do it because like
Yeah.
we need you in it for life. Like the fight is this big and this long right now. So yeah, I watch some dumb stuff too, man. Like it's the only way to get by.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so
Uh,
much. It was great talking to you, Jason.
I kept you longer than an hour, so I appreciate you staying
Well,
longer.
that's how good conversations go. I'm happy to.
And a shout out to Scott from the Green and Red podcast for hooking us up.
Very much.
Got to give Scott a shout out for that.
Thank you, Sparky, and Mr. Blazenko as well, his co-host.
Will, what are you working on next before you go?
I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm starting my own thing as well. In the fall, I'm going to be launching a YouTube channel called How to Live in a World on Fire. It's going to be these types of conversations, but particularly focused on the how we get through it, how we keep going aspect, and particularly focused on how we do that as men and young guys in particular. Because I think there's nobody talking to a lot of these young guys right now except some absolute psychopaths. And so, we're going to do the best we can to talk about some of that stuff as well. And if folks are interested, you can find me on Instagram at Will Potter or on my web. Do people go to websites anymore? On my website, willpotter.com.
I did define you.
I appreciate that. Man, you put all this work into the stupid website.
I linked your website.
Everybody wants to go.
I linked Will's website in the description for the show. So before I even write the description for the show,
we both put all this work into it. Please go to the website, sign up for the email list. I send them out like once a month, but the new show will be in there. And I would love to talk to you about that when the time comes.
I literally wrote something that got published. It's in a book called The Crisis of Masculinity that
no way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it just came out. Or I don't even know if it's out yet. I think it's out in September. It's up for pre-order now. Bram Gieben, who runs Revol Press, actually got the book published in another press. And it's, I think he wrote about 10 essays on the crisis of masculinity, and then he had about 5 or 6 guest essays, and I was a guest essay.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Actually, writing about a friend. Yeah, right. I wrote about
pull
a friend.
That up, or I'll hit you up for it.
I'll hit you. I'll hit you up. I'll give it to you. I wrote about a friend who enlisted, who a sergeant stopped him from putting a bullet in his head, and he would serve for like 20 years or almost 20 years, and then he became a leftist and tried to join DSA, and they wouldn't let him in.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
well, and one, good on you, and thank you for being vocal, and speaking about that and writing, being vulnerable about it. That was my, I've lost several friends to suicide, all guys. And it's just, there's so much pain underneath all of this. It's coming out in different ways for different people. But we gotta be more open about this.
Yeah. So I was honored to be a part of the series, and, anytime I could talk about that kind of stuff, I enjoy it. So, Will, you're doing the Lord's work.
I appreciate you, man. That means a lot. And thank you so much for having me on and for, continuing to sound the alarm and to speak truth to power when it's getting scarier to do so. So thank you for it.
Have a good rest of your evening, Brother Potter. And
Likewise, enjoy your what we do in the shadows. I'll recommend Buffy also, man. I think if you want, maybe I'll send you some. I'll find some DVDs on
I
your
gotta see if I
show.
can find it. I gotta see if I can find it for free. There's a lot
There
of
you go.
stuff on Tubi right now. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. You know what else Tubi has is all the Tales from the Crypts,
Oh, really?
all 7 seasons. So
Do those hold up
um
somewhat?
after season 4, it's just a titty parade.
That's what I remember from growing
It's
up.
just you want to see
Yeah.
some titties and a dead man?
Yes, sure,
It's sure.
maybe.
Yeah, I'm all for it. That's all we got. There's not much of a story around it, but you will see titties and a
Sold.
dead man. Yeah, the first few seasons, there's some Twilight Zoney,
Yeah.
not to be too off air with the conversation, but YouTube has a bunch of old shows, and they have all of these shows it was called Thriller, and it came out right after Twilight Zone, and Boris Karloff hosted it, and they were about an hour
I had
long.
no idea.
Yeah, if you look up Thriller, Boris Karloff, there's like 3
Okay, I'm gonna
seasons
check
of
that
it.
out.
And
I've
I
never
watched
even
some of
heard of that.
those. Some of those are pretty good. I like old stuff. I live alone, so I'm like a cat. I'm like a cat lady with no cats. It's sad,
No, I feel this very much. I have my books and my stories.
Yeah, I have my books. Like Burgess Meredith. I had so much time.
Exactly.
Mhm. So yeah, that's the extremely boring shit I'm going to do when I hang up here. I'm going to watch that crazy ass movie. Probably lock my doors and get all weird and scared for no reason. And
Same.
yeah, it's fucking like my neighbor. I live in this apartment complex, and we have this mobile gate. And my neighbor was coming in. He was backing in, and I didn't see him, and the gate hasn't been functioning, so I kept trying to close it, but he was coming in. I didn't see him. So he tried to like fly in, and he broke his side mirror off, and the gate is bent now, so it won't close.
Oh shit.
So I'm probably going to have like weird paranoid delusions about people. And the gate is like, it's barely 8 feet tall, so you could just jump over it.
But your illusion of safety.
Yeah, my illusion of safety is totally gone. It's like, but the gate!
But now they don't have to jump as high.
It's like someone was going to be like, I'd break into that house, but that goddamn 6-foot gate.
Now they're walking by. It's like, yes, here we go.
So that was the first thing I thought when he did that. I went over to the gate and I was like, oh man, you bent the gate. It's not going to open. And we both kind of shrugged our shoulders and just went to my house and ate these fucking tacos. And just oh, well.
That's the way to go. Just eat the tacos. At some point, it reaches that point of the day where it's like, yeah, I'm done.
There's nothing I can do now. This just you made it a free for all. But by the way, I live on top of a very large hill. It's my place, and then a bunch of radio antennas for cell towers and radio stations in California.
I was hoping. Oh, really? I didn't know if you said they're going to come from your underground bunker or what.
Like, if you came all the way up here to steal some computer from 2010, it's like, you can just go ahead and have it, man. You earned it.
That was a lot of work. Yeah,
it's
all the way
it's
up.
really far. Like I can't walk down that hill. Jesus, you're holding a computer too.
Leave it behind.
You want a wheelbarrow or something, brother? So, Will, thank you, Will.
My pleasure, man.
Have a very good rest of your evening, brother.
You too. It was great talking to you, Jason. Thank you.
Peace, Will. This is Will Potter. A very nice guy. I was not lying. My gate is broken. So is my sense of security. My neighbor and I do not have firearms, and I feel very confident that my neighbor in the front can't fight. I think he might have taken some self-defense classes as a young man. Maybe he could scream loud enough that I would hear him scream, and then I could run out of my back door. And that's what I'm really hoping for at this point. A high-pitched scream. Jason Shea. No. It's Taco Tuesday. Oh! Taco meat is out. Thank you, guys. I'll see you guys next week. MT will be with you Saturday. I'll be out. I'll be at home writing, being boring. But MT is going to take over with Kuba and I believe Scott Parkin. And I don't know if there's going to be another person, but Kuba and Scott Parkin are back for a very special What Fresh Hell. Thank you, guys. Again, thank you, Scott Parkin, for hooking this up. Will Potter is great. Hopefully we can get him back on the show. And maybe we all need to watch something funny. Let's watch cartoons.